This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. What I Saw in America by G.K. Chesterton. Section 22, Chapter 10, Part 2. Fads and Public Opinion. It sounds like a poem about an earthly paradise to say that in this land the old women can be more beautiful than the young. Indeed, I think Walt Whitman, the national poet, has a line somewhere almost precisely to that effect. It sounds like a parody upon Utopia, and the image of the lion lying down with the lamb, to say it is a place where a man might almost fall in love with his mother-in-law. But there is nothing in which the finer side of American gravity and good feeling does more honourably exhibit itself than in a certain atmosphere around the older women. It is not a cant phrase to say that they grow old gracefully, for they do really grow old. In this the national optimism really has in it the national courage. The old women do not dress like young women. They only dress better. There is another side to this feminine dignity in the old, sometimes a little lost in the young, with which I shall deal presently. The point for the moment is that even Whitman's truly poetic vision of the beautiful old woman suffers a little from that bewildering multiplicity and recurrence that is indeed the whole theme of Whitman. It is like the green eternity of leaves of grass. When I think of the eccentric spinsters and incorrigible grandmothers of my own country, I cannot imagine that any of them could possibly be mistaken for another, even at a glance. And in comparison, I feel as if I had been travelling in an earthly paradise of a more decorative harmonies. And I remember only a vast cloud of grey and pink, as of the plumage of cherubim in an old picture. But on second thoughts, I think this may be only the inevitable effect of visiting any country in a swift and superficial fashion, and that the grey and pink cloud is probably an illusion, like the spinning prairies scattered by the wheel of the train. Anyhow, there is enough of this equality and of a certain social unity favourable to sanity to make the next point about America very much of a puzzle. It seems to me a very real problem, to which I have never seen an answer, even such as I shall attempt here. Why a democracy should produce fads, and why, where there is so genuine a sense of human dignity, there should be so much of an impossible petty tyranny. I am not referring solely or even specially to Prohibition, which I discuss elsewhere. Prohibition is at least a superstition, and therefore next door to a religion. It has some imaginable connection with moral questions, as have slavery or human sacrifice. But those who ask us to model ourselves on the states which punish the sin of drink forget that there are states which punish the equally shameless sin of smoking a cigarette in the open air. The same American atmosphere that permits prohibition permits of people being punished for kissing each other. In other words, there are states psychologically capable of making a man a convict for wearing a blue necktie or having a green front door, or anything else that anybody chooses to fancy. There is an American atmosphere in which people may some day be shot for shaking hands or hanged for writing a postcard. As for the sort of thing to which I refer, the American newspapers are full of it, and there is no name for it but mere madness. Indeed, it is not only mad, but it calls itself mad. To mention but one example of many, there was actually boasted that some lunatics were teaching children to take care of their health, and it was proudly added that the children were health mad. That it is not exactly the object of all mental hygiene to make people mad did not occur to them, and they may still be engaged in their earnest labours to teach babies to be valetudinarians and hypochondriacs in order to make them healthy. In such cases we may say that the modern world is too ridiculous to be ridiculed. You cannot caricature a caricature. Imagine what a satirist of saner days would have made of the daily life of a child of 6, who was actually admitted to be mad on the subject of his own health. These are not days in which that great extravaganza could be written; but I dimly see some of its episodes like uncompleted dreams. I see the child pausing in the middle of a cartwheel, or when he has performed three-quarters of a cartwheel, and consulting a little notebook about the amount of exercise per diem. I see him pausing halfway up a tree, or when he has climbed exactly one-third of a tree, and then producing a clinical thermometer to take his own temperature. But what would be the good of imaginative logic to prove the madness of such people, when they themselves praise it for being mad? There is also the cult of the infant phenomenon, of which Dickens made fun, and of which educationalists make fusses. When I was in America, another newspaper produced a marvellous child of 6, who had the intellect of a child of 12. The only test given, and apparently one on which the experiment turned, was that she could be made to understand and even to employ the word annihilate. When asked to say something proving this, the happy infant offered the polished aphorism, "When common sense comes in, superstition is annihilated." In reply to which, by way of showing that I also am as intelligent as a child of 12, and there is no arrested development about me, I will say in the same elegant diction, "When psychological education comes in, common sense is annihilated." Everybody seems to be sitting round this child in an adoring fashion. It did not seem to occur to anybody that we do not particularly want even a child of 12 to talk about annihilating superstition; that we do not want a child of 6 to talk like a child of 12, or a child of 12 to talk like a man of 50, or even a man of 50 to talk like a fool. And on the principle of hoping that a little girl of 6 will have a massive and mature brain, there is every reason for hoping that a little boy of 6 will grow a magnificent and bushy beard. Now there is any amount of this nonsense cropping up among American cranks. Anybody may propose to establish coercive eugenics, or enforce psychoanalysis; that is, to enforce confession without absolution. And I confess I cannot connect this feature with the genuine democratic spirit of the mass. I can only suggest, in concluding this chapter, 2 possible causes, rather peculiar to America, which may have made this democracy so unlike all other democracies, and in this so manifestly hostile to the whole democratic idea. The first historical cause is Puritanism, but not Puritanism merely in the sense of prohibitionism. The truth is that prohibitions might have done far less harm as prohibitions, if a vague association had not arisen on some dark day of human unreason between prohibition and progress. And it was the progress that did the harm, not the prohibition. Men can enjoy life under considerable limitations, if they can be sure of their limited enjoyments. But under progressive Puritanism we can never be sure of anything. The curse of it is not the limitation, it is the unlimited limitation. The evil is not in the restriction, but in the fact that nothing can ever restrict the restriction. The prohibitions are bound to progress point by point. More and more human rights and pleasures must of necessity be taken away. For it is of the nature of this futurism that the latest fad is the faith of the future, and the most fantastic fad inevitably makes the pace. Thus the worst thing in the 17th century aberration was not so much Puritanism as sectarianism. It searched for truth not by synthesis but by subdivision. It not only broke religion into small pieces, but it was bound to choose the smallest piece. There is in America, I believe, a large religious body that has felt it right to separate itself from Christendom, because it cannot believe in the morality of wearing buttons. I do not know how the schism arose, but it is easy to suppose, for the sake of argument, that there had originally existed some Puritan body which condemned the frivolity of ribbons, though not of buttons. I was going to say of badges, but not buttons. But on reflection, I cannot bring myself to believe that any American, however insane, would object to wearing badges. But the point is that as the holy spirit of progressive prophecy rested on the first sect